What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Hope everybody's having a good one. Long time no talk. It's been a while since I've given you an episode of Post-Traumatic Survival, and I'm super excited to be launching the new version of it. I'll be having my guests in studio so we could put this on YouTube and have it in a video platform. And I'm more excited about that because you could actually see our faces. You could see what we feel and how we're talking about what we're talking about, and it's not just a voice. So I'm super excited for my new guest for this season, Monica Vera. She is a crime scene investigator from Miami-Dade County. And I was interested in bringing her along because what I've been reading and what I've been learning is I thought that they would go through PTSD, and they don't. They go through other similar things that have the same symptoms as PTSD, but one of them is called secondary traumatic stress, and the other one is called vicarious trauma. Both of these have been studied in psychologists before and therapists, but they had never been studied in forensic scientists. And now, in the last couple years, they've actually been studying on how CSIs go through these traumatic events and how they perceive them and how they go through them. So I'm super excited to have, like I said, Monica Vera as my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, this is take two, and we're gonna say this. We're gonna say this on camera.
Yeah, we are.
The first one, we were having some mic issues where her audio wasn't being picked up correctly, and we're doing this again. So, but all right. So let me go ahead and jump into this because I want to keep what we spoke about fresh in my head.
Yes.
I didn't know about this, but I started learning and doing my research. And vicarious trauma may occur in forensic scientists after repeated exposure to upsetting visuals and other stressors. This psychological problem was first noticed in mental health therapists who deal closely with clients who reveal traumatic life events. Vicarious trauma may profoundly alter a person's worldview and self-image. I know for sure what PTSD has done to me, how I perceive things in life. Mm-hmm. What has being a crime scene investigator done to you and molded the way that you live currently now in your life?
I think the biggest difference is that before, certain things were very big things for me. A friend didn't call you back, or whatever it was. And now those things are just very minute in my world because you have something to compare it to, right? So now what I compare it to are these things that I see on a day-to-day basis, and so everything else just kind of seems like very insignificant or smaller or whatever. You pick and choose what's now significant. And significant is because we're exposed to like the ugly of the world. And I think that has made me a more positive person though, because I can kind of see the ugly of the world and go to my life and say, I'm so glad that I don't have that in my life, in my day-to-day life.
And you're seeing, I think, the worst part of the ugliness, because like ugly to me is seeing someone do or say something bad. You're actually seeing the end product.
Absolutely. And I think that's the difference. And I don't expect everybody to kind of, respond like I respond, because not everybody's exposed to what I'm exposed to. But that's where our job makes a difference in our day-to-day life. We don't see things from a normal, standpoint. We have very different filters than everybody else because we see how ugly it can be.
How are you able to approach a crime scene, I guess, without kind of having that mentality, right? Because you're supposed to be objective yeah. When you're there. You're not there to be on the victim side or anything. You're there to see facts.
Right, exactly. So we approach every single scene exactly the same way, and there's a method to how we do our job, and it's very methodical. We go in, we are set to do something. We do ABC, ABC, ABC. I've taught you about this, and we do it in a very methodical way. And that kind of like alleviates the emotional aspect. Now, that's not to say certain scenes don't get the best of us. We're still human. And I don't ever want to leave that human aspect out of my world because I feel like it's still needed, right? And I still need to be a human outside of my crime scene world. But we approach everything exactly the same way. There's nothing that we don't approach like we did the prior scene, and I think that helps. It's almost like a machine. And so we just do things exactly the same way, and that removes that
So
aspect of it.
when you get called to a scene, which is this is a question I had, I didn't know how that worked. Are you told prehand, hey, we're going to a murder scene,
Right.
or we're going to a drowning? Are you told that, or are you just saying we're going to a scene so that you show up there
No, so
without knowing someone was murdered? Because maybe they weren't. Maybe it was suicide or something. I
right.
mean,
So for the most part, there is preliminary information that's given to us, and so we already know how we're approaching this. And the reason for that is because if it is a murder, if it's a homicide or something like that, it's our team needs to be dispatched as a team. It's not just a one-person job. So a homicide is treated a little bit different than, a drowning or a natural death or something like that. So if it's a homicide, several of us have to be sent out. We all have a different job to do in that scene. And so we need to kind of prepare for that. So yes, there is information that is given to us beforehand, whether it's, a robbery detective or a homicide detective. And then depending on that information is how we approach it. There's certain equipment that we might need that we don't always carry with us. So we need to go prepared for these scenes. But nonetheless, it's still approached in the same exact way. So a drowning or a hanging or, a suicide, I'm still going to show up and I'm still going to do exactly the same thing that I do on every single scene. I still take my pictures exactly the same way. I still document the scene exactly the same way. And I talk to the detective exactly the same way. So nothing about that changes.
so we were speaking earlier, and you mentioned to me what it is or what it was the incident in your life that brought you to wanting to do this as a career. Do you feel once you learned everything you learned, how can I explain this? Once you feel everything you learned and you actually saw and went through your first crime scene, that idea of just curiosity at first that you had was gone. Like it shifted to something else that was more purposeful, the job became, or something like that?
So prior to me becoming a crime scene investigator, I did certain certifications where I actually worked at the medical examiner's office. So I was already exposed to...
That's at the morgue and stuff.
That's at the morgue, yeah. So I had already done certain things with bodies before, so I had already been exposed to that aspect. So that curiosity part was not like surprising to me. It wasn't like a curiosity thing. It was more so the methods that they went about to investigate the scene or to process the scene. That was interesting to me. That was interesting to learn how they go about everything, how we go about doing everything, our day to day. So sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're thrown a curveball and you show up to a scene and you're like, oh my God, what do I do here? What is this? Because you don't know if it's a suicide or like a murder, and there's been times, just to answer your question, by the way, that we get called out to a scene where we think it's, a suicide or a natural death. And then we end up finding a bullet hole, and, it's
right. Something that doesn't seem normal.
So then we have to treat it as a murder scene and let's call out the team and let's refocus and let's regroup. So it has happened before. That aspect of it I found interesting. The dead body part, that wasn't as surprising. And the morgue, it was a little bit different. You're at that point, you're seeing autopsies and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're removing organs and stuff.
So that's different. That's a little different. But yeah, it was the processing aspect of it that was interesting.
How do you feel that the job has changed your view of life? We mentioned how you see things smaller or whatnot, that little things are little things. Like,
right.
What about the job is it that made you, switch over and I guess appreciate life more?
Well, like I said before, I think it's just seeing the negative in life firsthand that a lot of people don't get to see. We see how a petty thing can lead into death and how that can escalate so quickly. When you hear what drove one person to murder another one, something as simple as a parking space or, whatever, relationship troubles, like it's not worth somebody taking someone's life and someone losing their life over. And so when you're exposed to this enough, you know that you have to leave that there when you go home. And I'll tell you, one of the things that helps me is that I never talk about work at home. with my partner.
I was going to ask you that.
Never gets brought up. And I like it that way. But I also understand that not everybody is like me. Some people need to talk about it on a day-to-day basis to release that. I find other ways to release that. I don't want to talk to my partner about it. This is why I didn't want to date a cop because I don't want to go home and talk about work. I want to leave work where work is. That's important to me. I need my brain to be turned off.
Okay.
Some people, on the other hand, find relief in dating someone within their field because they can relate and they feel understood. And that's totally okay too.
Yeah, people are different.
Yeah, people are different. So what works for me is not that. I don't want to go home to talk about, and thank God he's not curious about it at all. He doesn't care.
So what works for you? Because from what I've seen and gotten to know of you on social media and stuff, I could tell that you're very into you. Like,
right.
You want to make sure that you are okay and happy. Like,
yeah. And that can be in the form of working out. That can be in the form of me just keeping up with myself, my hair. I'm Colombian, so that's in my DNA. Or it can be therapy. I've done therapy. I've still sometimes go to therapy. Or that can be, I've recently trying floating therapy and, all these other things that I can shut my brain off. I've done EMDR therapy before, which was amazing to me. That honestly saved my life.
Can you explain to our viewers and listeners what that is? Okay. I know it's like almost... I tell people it's almost like hypnosis.
It almost is. It really is. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Rerouting or whatever it is. I don't know. I'll look for the actual meaning of it. But basically, it just helps you whenever you think of a negative memory that provokes that instant anxiety attack in you or panic attack in you, that you're rerouting that memory in your brain by doing a series of exercises with your therapist, where when you recall that memory, you're no longer triggered by it. So I did a series of that for a while, where I had to work through some aspects of my life that caused my severe PTSD.
So it's actually targeting that one specific trigger is what I want people to understand.
Right.
I chose not to do that because I have so many triggers that it would
but it can work on different triggers. So I had one, how do I explain it? I had different triggers, but it was all leading to one
experience.
Reason.
Well, it's all one traumatic event.
Right.
So that's what I mean. EMDR might give you different triggers. It's helping you with your triggers, but they usually take you back to that one event that changed
your life or whatever it may be. And so for me, it was smells. I'm sure you can relate to smells and sounds and, shit like that you like. Immediately, it just brings you back. It transports you back to that, and you start panicking. You start getting those heart palpitations, and you can't breathe, and you're like panicking, and you're getting nervous, and so
for me, thick blood does it. Like the thick, oily, dark red blood does it for me.
Yeah, and I will tell you, before when we first did the recording of this, and we had to re-record, you and I got into the conversation of Surfside.
Yeah.
So Surfside, for those of you that don't know, it was a building collapse here in Surfside, Florida, and Miami-Dade Police Department were the ones who handled that scene. Our crime scene unit handled that scene with the help of Miami Beach, by the way. We couldn't have done it without those girls. But I will say that a lot of people would say, well, the smell of this would trigger me back to that. Believe it or not, for me, we had a building next to the building collapse. And this building was a brand new building. And they were gracious enough to allow us to use their facilities, to use the restrooms or to just get some fresh air. It was hot as hell out there. It was July. When was it? July? June. It was June. And so it was really hot. For me, till this day, the smell of that building triggers.
The relief
building. They had a really nice scent. It smelled very nice. But I smell that today, and that's what transports me back to Surfside. It's not everything else. It's not the rubble. It's not the beach. It's not the sand. It's not any of that. It's not the sunblock that we had to wear 24/7. It's the smell of that building. And so you just never know what's going to be triggering.
That's what your brain associates with Surfside.
Exactly.
Maybe for you, that outdoor area of the beach was already something your brain had already known and stuff like that. This was significant. That this is what it meant, you know?
This is what it tied it to that. And this is where we went to like just be like,
that's what I was going to say. Subconsciously, deep down inside, it's the same thing that happens to me come April 13, September 12, September 13. I, for a while, stopped recognizing those days, like just ignored it. I knew September 1st would come along, and I didn't look at the date or calendar all of September. But yet, I would wear like monitors or like a Fitbit or whatever, and I could see that September 12th, September 13th, my body was all over the place.
right.
Because subconsciously, my brain, my body knows those are the important days for you. So I think for you, subconsciously, your brain knew that smell is when you were honestly thinking about everything you just saw.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when we had that timeout moment to really process what was going on and the gravity of the situation. So yeah, to this day, I'm like, but you know, after doing the EMDR therapy sessions, I think you're more aware of when this starts happening. And so you try to catch yourself. Even though Surfside did get the best of me, and I will say, and I'm very open about it, it took me a while for me to recognize that what was happening and that it was starting to happen again. And so I had to catch myself and do something about it. I was more proactive about it. I will say the department tried their best and, you know, to the best of their abilities at that
with
moment.
what they knew.
With what
I
they
mean,
knew, because this was such a different situation that nobody knew how to handle, that everybody was kind of learning as they were going. They did have psychological services out there for us. They had therapy dogs. They offered, but at that moment, you don't really want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about it. You just want to, you know, go on about your day, finish your job, go home, go to sleep, come back and do it all over again the next morning. Now, after the aftermath was a little bit harder, and I caught myself kind of just not being myself. I wasn't joking around.
You were disassociated.
I was completely just not having it. I was just out of it, and it was very stressful, and I cried like crazy. I was angry at the world. I was angry at my friends. I was angry at my command staff, at my bosses, my supervisors, my coworkers annoyed me. I was just going through it. And it took me a little bit. I even wanted to leave crime scene, I'll be honest. I started looking for other things that I could do because I was like, I cannot allow this to change me this much.
You felt like it almost broke you, that event.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it wasn't so much the job, because I feel like for crime scene investigators, we are mentally prepared to face anything and everything. It wasn't the job. As hard as that was, it was all the other stressors that came with it that nobody was prepared for. So that constant pressure of go, 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 you don't get to take a time out because these families are expecting an answer. We knew that. And so we could not afford to take a time out and dwell on whatever the hell we were going through, because these families were depending on us. And that was the most important thing for us.
Which, come to think about it, to me now, maybe that's something that bothered you so much. I don't know. Like we spoke about Surfside, like I said, we tried recording this whole episode earlier and it didn't work. But something that caught me off guard was how you mentioned that you were doing your A and B shifts, 12 on, 12 off. And that to me felt so awkward, because all I could think about is my deployment, where yes, there was A and B shift on going on patrol, but technically my brain knew I was at the war zone. Right. I was at work. So for you guys, you were literally told, hey, you're at work, go off work. But then in 12 hours, you're coming right back to work. And then let's
not forget that while we were all at Surfside on, Alpha Bravo, 12
other things were happening.
Other things were happening in the county. And so who handles those calls? Us. There was times where we were being dispatched from Surfside to go handle other calls and come back to Surfside. And that's what people don't know.
Because it was 30-something days, like you said.
And we were there for 33 days, so we still have to handle those calls. We're still responsible. We can't just say, no, sorry, we can't go to that. No, we still have to process those scenes. And so it was the constant, let me put my Surfside hat on. Oh, let me go and handle this suicide, come back to Surfside, come back to this stressful environment where you're like constantly getting screamed at and like, you gotta go, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. It was It was absolutely a nightmare.
I can just imagine that you had, as well as the stress, as you know, that news stations are all around you.
All around. And
How do you do your job, which sometimes your job involves with certain things that maybe certain people would not agree with the way you just
Exactly.
moved somebody or something like that.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
and
saying?
That did happen. And that did happen. And again, it was trial and error. We've never had a scene like this. And so we were kind of learning as we were going. When it comes to the stress on crime scene per se, I will say this, and I said it to you before, and I'll say it now because we were re-recording. A lot of times for crime scene personnel, it's not so much the job that's stressful. It's unfortunately our command staff that's not mentally or emotionally equipped to supervise us a proper way. And I'm not saying that they're not good supervisors. They might have been great supervisors at another unit.
Or it just could have been like how we said that this
They
event had never happened,
Exactly.
so they've never supervised in this event
Exactly.
or went through it as a junior individual.
Exactly. And so if you don't know what we do on a day-to-day basis, and you don't know and you don't understand it, not just on a physical aspect, but on an emotional aspect, it's going to be very hard for us to have good supervisors. That's not to say they're not great people. They might be, and they might mean well. But when it comes to supervising a unit like crime scene,
there needs to be a lot more understanding what that individual is going through. I get what you're saying.
Exactly. And it can make the job a lot harder. And I think that's what ended up happening. Unfortunately, we were faced with very difficult circumstances where not everybody knew what they were doing, and we were trying to follow someone that was just as lost as us, and
I hadn't been through the walk yet. I hadn't been through there yet.
At all. And so it was adding stress on stress, and it was just a bit much for us.
What is your go-to, your go-to relief, your go-to, how are you able to disconnect from your job? Which is one of the questions I had. I did ask people to ask me questions for you. And one of the questions I got was, how do you disconnect emotionally from your job?
Okay, so, and again, this is what works for me. This might not necessarily be the same answer for all crime scene investigators, right? It's important for me to have a good support system at work. So my coworkers that I can go to and vent to, because they're the only ones that understand what I'm going through. And I do have that. My squad is essential to me. As a matter of fact, we do shift bids. So we bid for our shifts, and we probably have the worst days and hours, but we do so because that means we get to work together. And that's the only way we're going to do it. And that's what I choose. For me, it's a lot more important to have a good support system at work, people that I get along with and that I love working with, versus good hours. And then I get to go home and disconnect completely from
That's what I was going to say. For an individual like you, which we're not saying everybody needs to be like you, because this is what works for you.
Right.
But for an individual like you, that you, as part of your rule, is to disconnect it and not bring it home.
Exactly.
You need to have that other cohort, that little group that you
Absolutely. And I do.
that no one else understands,
Exactly.
that your boyfriend doesn't understand, and they're at work.
Exactly. And that's the person or the people that I can go to and say, man, I just had this case. Look at the pictures. It was insane. It was stressful. Or I can call them while I'm at a call and say, guys, I need help. I can't do this by myself. And they're going to drop everything that they're doing and they're going to come and help me. That's the type of support that you need in this line.
Especially if you want to disconnect it from bringing it home.
Exactly.
Because if not, you need to have that person at home that understands.
Exactly. For me particularly, I want to be able to go home and completely, when I tell you that there's times where I don't talk about work at all. Maybe we talk about, like, I don't know, my hours or my schedule, but when it comes to scenes, that is never discussed at home. And that's very, 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 very important to me. My working out, it's what I started to do when I was going through my severe PTSD. It was my escape. My therapist had suggested it to me as a form of just releasing, along with journaling and stuff like that. And so I do that a lot. But there's times where I literally go home and I don't turn on the TV. My phone is off. The lights might be off. I just need complete silence. And I know for some people, silence might be very loud, right? For me, I just need that moment. I feel like my work world is very loud, And I'm not saying literally loud. I'm just saying it's emotionally loud. And so I need to kind of shut off when I go home, where I need to decompress. And decompressing for me is just silence. I just need that moment where I can take a deep breath and really process what I just saw, what I just had to process, what I had to see, what I had to smell, what I had to, all these things. Your senses are like, it's overload when you're on certain scenes. And so to be able to disconnect and go home and do that, it's very important to me. That's why I couldn't date a cop.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Why are you going to bring that home? So then, I mean, not even if you bring it home, you guys could be on different shifts. I don't even want to hear about your shift or what you went through at all. Mine was enough.
Exactly. That works for some people, right?
It does.
Because they feel like they can relate. That's great. That's not for me.
Yeah.
It's definitely not for me.
Definitely, at least in my perspective, it was harder because I have to, at least what I went through when me and my wife got together, it was more like I had to inform her. She had to learn about what it is that I was going through. So she had to go through therapy with me and stuff like that so that she understood. Where it's different for you because you have that group at work, right?
Exactly.
Like for me and for certain veterans and for maybe certain first responders, once they're gone from that job, that you don't have that group to speak to anymore. This is where I think your home, or at least the way you're dealing with it at home, is very important because
Absolutely.
when you're not doing this job anymore and you still don't want to talk to your partner about this, you still got to figure out what is going to keep you.
And that's not to say that there's times where I can tell my partner, listen, I just had a really bad day at work. And if I act a certain way, I need you to just bear with me. That has been said before. Or I'll send them a text message and say, hey, this weekend, I don't want to do anything. I just need to stay home.
Yeah, but you're not going to talk about what happened.
And he'll just say, I got you, baby. It's fine. Like, it's fine. He doesn't need the reasons why. He just needs to know. But I think it's also important for me to inform him and not just throw that on him without explaining why I'm feeling a certain type
communication's
of way,
key 100%,
Exactly.
especially when you're dealing with individuals or with one person or something that is going through something so emotionally strenuous that it's important because, like
Absolutely.
you said, if you're not bringing it home, then he needs to understand when is a buffer time or whatnot. And
it is important for us, like at work, which I think it's one of the changes that they've implemented since Surfside. It's how do we disconnect while we're still connected? Meaning, how do we disconnect while we're still at work and we're on duty? And so, for the most part, when we're all caught up in our reports, because a lot of people don't understand, it's our job is not just done when we walk away from the scene. We still have to go back to our office. We still need to process our evidence. We still need to upload our photos. And there's times where then we have to write the report and relive all of that all over again. And then sometimes testify in court about this case.
I was going to say that. And then you have
and
2 years later.
2 years later. And so it just doesn't end there. Obviously, we don't have it as difficult as I would say homicide detectives because their job is a lot more detailed than ours. And we work hand in hand with them. But it just doesn't end there. And so how do we turn off while we're at work if we can? When we're all caught up in our reports and we're just at the station waiting for a call, we play games or we joke around. We have some of the darkest sense of humor you can probably imagine.
Yep, I understand that.
But we also play games. We play Monopoly. We play, Parcheesi. Whatever is going to allow us some free time of mental disconnect. And that is essential to us.
I can relate to that because in Iraq, we would always joke around. You were like, if you want to keep a Marine busy, just give him a rock. That's it. And what we would do is we would just grab that rock and find a basket or find something to target at. And now everybody's throwing a rock over there at that thing.
And then as you start betting and then you start doing
whatever.
Whatever.
But your brain is now literally while you're in that location, your brain has just disconnected and gone somewhere else.
Exactly.
You're in a game room now.
Exactly. And so that's what we try to do. And I will say after Surfside, our command staff has done a really good job at kind of like seeing, hearing us out, taking some feedback and saying what works for you guys. And we have voiced this and they have implemented it. So I will give them credit for that. They've been really good about that.
So there's definitely been a shift more for mental health, thoughtness of the individual going through the job after Surfside.
Absolutely. And we do have psychological services visit us from time to time. They come, and speak to us, especially when there's like a baby death.
Kids.
Yeah, kids are always hard for us. So they always try to come by and talk to us about it, decompress, stuff like that. They're always available. I mean, we have psychological services available 24/7. They're great. But I can also understand why some people don't want to talk about it, right? It's very hard to open up that kind of worms, and it almost feels very daunting.
You see,
But
I agree with you, but the can's going to open up by itself one day.
By itself one day, and then it's going to explode at that point. Right?
That's the problem.
And unfortunately, we have seen that in the department. I'm sure you're aware of what's been going on in our department, unfortunately. And mental health, man, it's a big thing. And I feel like, especially nowadays, we are under so much pressure from the public. We're the bad guys. We're not, we are judged 24/7, and all we want to do is good, right? For the most part. But to be able to do this very, very stressful job on top of being constantly judged by the outside world and media and all this, it just adds another layer that nobody really was prepared for, right? And so now we're having to navigate through all of that too. So it's a constant trying to adjust.
See, that's crazy. It's crazy that for you guys, it's something new. And for you guys, I mean, the first responder field and stuff like that. For us and in the military, it was always front and center because we're not even taught this in boot camp, but you grow up hearing about what the guys from Vietnam went through when they got back, that they were called baby killers and all this stuff, that while you're doing your job, you're already thinking about the pressure. At least I was. I remember in 2004, there was this one time, I've always been the more public relations type person, or the person that could associate more with speaking to the public. And for some reason in 2004, they would always throw I guess for that reason, not for some reason, for that reason, they would always throw the reporters on my vehicle. And I had the reporters on my vehicle. And I remember for like a whole week, I had this French reporter, which that's the only time that we got kind of like told something, because of definitely how their view on us was in the war and stuff like that in 2004. And I'll never forget that. That's the only time I really felt stressed, to where I was screaming at my guys and stuff like, hey, bro, don't forget, we're under camera. We're being watched. We got to be careful what we perceive, because that's going to affect whatever we do is going to affect the whole entire Marine Corps and the U.S.'s.
And the pressure, just the pressure
over there
of that alone. Yeah.
So I can't, but you see, that was more like a pressure where it was, you don't want to let somebody down, right? I think for you guys, the pressure you have is, you need to give someone answers. Right. I think someone wants answers, or the victim's family, or.
Right. Well, let's face it. Cops are not necessarily called when there's something good happening. It's always a negative, right? When cops are involved, unfortunately, that's just the nature of the job. And you're either there, for a domestic dispute or whatever. There's always an issue going on, and hence why cops are called in the first place. And so automatically, you're already going into a negative situation, and you're already being viewed as the bad guy, right? And then throw all this other media stuff that's been going on lately, where we are depicted as the bad guys, and the police department needs to be defunded, and the police needs to be defunded because whatever, they're not equipped to do this ABC, XYZ, whatever. But if people understood what it really takes, and I'm not even a cop, but I obviously I work with them, and I see their day-to-day and the stressors of everything, having to like just answer these calls and go, and no matter what's going on in their personal life, you have to put your personal life on hold to go and deal with someone else's drama.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're being criticized for it. It's very disheartening. You want to give up. It almost makes you want to say, why am I doing this? It's not appreciated, but you know what? A lot of us don't do this for that. Like, at least for crime scene purposes, what made me stay was that I genuinely love what I do. Genuinely love my job. And that brief moment in time where I considered leaving, it was because I was trying to escape. It was like running away. I figured if I run away, the problem's gonna go away. That's not the case. You gotta confront the issue.
No, that problem would have come and smacked you in the
Exactly.
face a little couple years
Exactly.
down the road.
And so you kind of have to self-reflect, look at yourself in the mirror and say,
And
okay,
soul searching.
yeah. And you got to say, okay, what's really the problem? Is it how I'm perceiving everything, how I'm receiving everything, and how I'm processing everything? And what am I doing about it? I'm just.
Or is it the actual job?
Or
but
is it the actual
if it's
job?
what I'm
Right,
perceiving,
but
then I have control on it.
Exactly. And so at that point, you got to take a step back and say, what do I do? What are my options? I need to do something about this. And I did. I broke at work. I mean, I'm telling you, I was lashing out at my coworkers and my command staff, my sergeants, and one of them in particular had to sit me down and say, "What's going on, Monica? Like, this is not you. Like, this is not you. What's going on?"
Now, do you guys have, I guess, the same repercussions that a firefighter or a police officer would have, where if you go ask for help, you kind of get benched? Because there's that fear that
Exactly, that you don't
people
want
have.
to talk because you don't want to be like taken off.
like
or
if you
things
love your
like
job,
that.
that's what people don't understand. Like, we might love our job, whatever we do, even though we know it's stressful and stuff like that, but we love what we do
Yeah.
and we want to continue doing it. So I might know I have problems right now, and I might be self-medicating at home by drinking myself to sleep, instead of asking for help because I'm scared that they're going to take my badge and my gun away.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like that. It is. But at that point, I think you gotta make a decision. What's more important, being benched for a while and getting the help that you need, or continuing down that path?
I'm going to say something, and I hadn't been wanting to talk about the most recent events at all, but I had said this forever. I've been saying this since I was in the Marine Corps. Mental health won't change, and the troops' morale and the way that troops and your workers are dealt with aren't going to change until the general bites the bullet. And I do really hope that within the most recent events,
Right.
with the director having the issues that he was having, I really do hope that mental health shifts, at least the approach on it and the way that it's
Dealt with.
and
Yeah.
not dealt with, but presented to an individual.
Yeah.
Because right now it's not presented to you. You have to ask for it. And like I said, when you ask for it, you're going to get benched, right? So literally this example that just recently happened with the highest ranking officer, I think that's the most perfect example, because if that guy technically would have asked for help, there's technically an issue and we're going to have to bench you. Like,
Yeah.
call the assistant up, because
Yeah.
how can the director? But that's the reality that we need to actually, and I think everybody from the mayor, I mean, the governor, I mean, everybody needs to understand that even the director, even the generals can have a breakdown,
Yeah.
can have a
breaking
problem,
point, yeah.
a breaking point that they need help for and
Yes.
ask for help. And if that's the case, why are you going to strip that individual from their job? Mind you, as long as whatever they're going through is not life-threatening.
Right.
But I say to myself, maybe his problem or anybody else's that's been through this, maybe their problems weren't life-threatening. But when you get to that point where
Or when they accumulate.
but you get to that point where that's it. It accumulated so much. It's that whole thing that we said, the bottle's going to explode. The
Exactly.
can's going to explode. It's like you shook the can now too much. The pressure's going to build up. Okay, but you should be able to ask for that help, right? So I
Right.
really do think that, with the most recent events, a lot of the way that mental health is going to go forward, at least in our county, is hopefully going to change
Yeah.
for the better of the individual.
I hope
Because
so. I hope so, because unfortunately there is a lot of that going on. And listen, I think what happens is it's kind of like a vicious cycle. So you have a stressful job, and then it starts. You don't talk about it, so you're bottling everything up, and then you go home, and your spouse might not be a cop, or
or you don't
a
want to
first
bring it up to
responder,
them, like
you
you
don't
said.
you don't want to talk about it, so you're bottling everything up. Then your spouse doesn't understand it. They don't know how to deal with it, and you're just walking around, just kind of like marinating in this anger and this resentment and this stress and anxiety and whatever. It's building up, and then you go back to work and you have to do it all over again. And it's, again, a vicious cycle until you just are fed up. And by then it might be too late. And
But
you
that's-
might harm yourself or you might harm someone else. And so I feel like at the very least, if you don't want to talk about it with your family, reach out to someone. I promise you, anybody in the department is willing to talk to you.
And anybody. I mean, anybody.
And it doesn't have to be psychological services or your bosses, for that matter. If you're scared of losing your job, if you're scared of having to go to therapy, if you're scared of having to be put in a rehab, seek someone that can understand you, a buddy, a coworker, someone that you trust.
And I was going to bring that up. I have multiple friends, and some high-ranking officials in the police department that know that with me, because I speak about mental health, I'm an advocate about it. They kind of like offload with me sometimes, either at the cigar shop or I get phone calls late at night by certain individuals. But here's the where I want to get at, though. And this is where I'm saying I hope that the current events have changed the way that higher ups will now go forward with. A lot of people have gotten to the point where they have to go to somebody outside, or they've bottled it up and then finally go to somebody outside, right? But then it's too late, because I've had individuals that have come to me and I have to tell them, get help, dude. You're past calling your friend. I need to go to your house, pick you up, and take you to a doctor. You can't do that, bro, because I'm going to lose my job. So I really do hope that everything that has happened recently will change that, because if your fear of losing your job, which this is what bothers me the most, people are scared of losing their job, their livelihood, and because of that, they lose their life. Right? Where at the end of the day, you can realize that, yes, this is your purpose, this is what you love to do. There is no life after that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think in our department, I could be wrong, but you won't lose your job for this. You might be taken out of rotation for a certain period of time, but you will not lose your job.
Which is correct.
For this.
You won't.
You shouldn't, and you won't, and you can fight this. Especially right now under today's climate, because of what's going on. If you seek help, you will be given that help. Your job will still be there for you. But if you need a timeout, you deserve that timeout. Give yourself that timeout, because it's too late. Late is too late.
And if you love this job, it's a lot better for you to request it.
Absolutely.
Don't be told involuntarily you got to do this.
Absolutely. But I think it boils down to you being able to recognize that within yourself and say, I need to do something about it. I'm no longer the person that I want to be or that I am in my core. But a lot of people don't kind of have the right tools. And that's what I wish the department did. I wish the department can talk about what it looks like. It's not just because some people are walking around, they don't realize that they're experiencing this.
100%.
They're completely unaware. And so, PTSD or stress or anxiety can look very different on everybody.
Yep.
Some people might look angry. Some people might look sad. Some people might not show up to work. Some people are physically ill. And so you might think that something's going on with your body, or you might think that something else is causing all of this, when in reality, it's the accumulation of your job. And so I wish the department did a better job at talking about this. Being able to recognize the signs.
Giving people the clues.
Tools, yeah. And so let's talk about it more openly. What is it that it looks like? Let's dive a little bit deeper into it.
Now, I don't know if PTSD made me this way. I'm very black and white. I like to just kind of just cut the bullshit sometimes. And I had this conversation with a chief one time at the cigar shop, and we were talking about it, and it was like I believe he mentioned that, certain things that you say, I heard you talk about that, made me think of me, made me think of my experience or whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, the only reason you guys don't tell people that this is a precursor or whatnot is because then you're going to have so many people asking for help. And I feel that that's the problem, or that was the problem, right? Which is like I'm saying. I've always said, like I said, things aren't going to change until you suffer through it, until the poor people aren't gonna get their foot off the foot off their neck, until the rich people feel that suffrage, right? So then when they do, then, oh my God, let me be more softer. It's the mentality, right?
Absolutely.
Well, unless the big dog does not go through this. And that's another thing. It's like you have so many of these higher ups, so many of these people in charge that think it's a crutch to show that you can suffer, to show that something can affect you, right?
It's the ego mentality. It's the
all of this builds into your junior individuals not wanting to ask for help. Because
and I'll tell you this, I feel that as important as I know for a fact officers have to go through annual training and they have to complete a certain amount of hours in whatever it is that they need to do, and they have to go and shoot a gun to be able to requalify. You should be obligated to do a week-long mental health seminar or whatever as part of your job.
I 100%.
Everybody should be obligated to do so. 100%. And I know some people are going to roll their eyes and be like, oh my God, I don't need that. Trust me, everyone needs it. Just that week off from doing your job and just sitting in a class with a mental health counselor, talking about the signs. What can you do? How to not take it home? How to talk to your family about it? Are you drinking? Are you doing other things that you're escaping to and you don't even realize that you're doing this? Let's talk about this more often.
And saying at the beginning of this, it's normal to feel this way.
It's normal to feel this way. Yeah. Our job is stressful and it can catch up to us. But let's take this week
because it goes
every year to have everybody completed and be part of your classification.
It goes to like the train of thought that I mentioned in the Marine Corps, at least what I experienced, that how can I ask for help when my sergeant, when I was like a junior Marine, a private or a Lance Corporal, when my sergeant's not asking for help, but when we're off work in the dorm, in the barracks, my sergeant's a drunk, a sloshed drunk, angry as hell while we're off work. Clearly the guy's mad or something. Something's wrong with him.
Right.
But it's weakness. It's also like leaders don't show this. It's like we just got to be, I think if we're more human in these jobs that we believe technically are not for humans, you know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, we're not meant to see the insides of ourselves, is what I tell people.
Right.
It affects you. It does change you. But you still got to feel human. And I think that we need to start showing more of that human side.
Absolutely.
In these high stressful jobs.
And taking the negative connotation off, or like the stigma off of mental health and mental issues. Like I don't want anybody to think that just because you have panic attacks or you have anxiety or you have whatever it is that you have, that it's automatically viewed as negative. I am very open about my anxiety and panic attacks. I'm very open about it. Anybody can ask me about it. We can talk about it all day long.
Which is something that has angered me with this whole scenario, this recent scenario. Why, if this is the perfect opportunity to actually bring mental health, talk about it to the forefront, it really isn't. Just because we don't want to talk about what happened. Okay, right. But it happened.
Right.
And if, like I said, if it happened to that guy, the one in charge, that individual, guy or girl in charge, it could happen to the same person that just started day one today and went to see their first crime scene.
Absolutely, 1,000%. And the same way that I am expected to complete, a blood pathogens, whatever course every year and a certain amount of hours that I need to complete, I should be able to complete a certain amount of hours of mental health.
I agree. If we have to do a diversity training, then we should do training on other things.
Absolutely. And so I feel like that's where I would want to see some change. I want to see this become less taboo because, God forbid, someone lost their shit yesterday and, they had to go home. Listen, there's been plenty of times where I've left a scene sobbing uncontrollably because it got the best of me, and I've had to call my sergeant and say, I need to go home. I need a timeout. I need to go home. And they're like, not a problem. It's just very well understood. But again, this is where a good supervisor that understands our job comes in.
Yeah, this is somebody that has been through the worst crime scene of their life and is now seeing you go through that, and they might say, hey, go take a 5-minute breather. I'm going to go in and take these next 100 pictures or whatever.
So we don't hand off our cameras to anybody. However,
but an example, at least.
Absolutely. We have had, and to this day, hands down, my favorite supervisor, sergeant, he's no longer in crime scene anymore. He did that. He would actually go to our scenes. He would buy us coffee. He would buy us water, Gatorade, whatever. And he would say, let's take a 5-minute break. Like, let's just take a 5-minute break, cool down, go to your trucks, drink some water, and then we can resume. Like, there's no time limit. We don't have to finish this in an hour. There's no time limit.
The scene is yours.
The scene is ours. So as long as we have to be there, it doesn't matter. But let's take a 5-minute breather, you know? And I think it's so important to have people like that in charge.
It is, because you could be banging your head, doing something wrong for an hour, or take a 5-minute breather, come back and do it in 20 minutes and never bang your head again throughout the whole time.
Exactly, because now you're refreshed. You're like, okay, I was able to disconnect a little bit. I hope that the department as a whole, and not just our department, but all departments, if there's anybody out there listening that's within power to create these changes, let's think about this a little bit more. Let's make it more of a norm for all officers, first responders, military, everybody to do some sort of course or some sort of disconnect for 1 week where we can just talk about these things and nothing's going to be held against us. That we can go and seek for help, and we're not going to be quote unquote punished for it.
It's so taboo because of the old school mentality. I think I tagged you on it when I first started setting up my studio, that I was just recording and playing around doing things. I talked about mental health in Latinos, in the Latin community.
Oh yes.
Now clearly in South Florida, majority Latin. I'll never forget, I got asked by an individual to speak, extremely high-ranking individual in the county, to speak, because he was like, wow, I hear you talk about mental health all the time and PTSD, and it's not like I didn't make it seem like you're a victim, but I at least when I speak to where I'll talk about scenarios on how I deal with triggers, or triggers make me feel, so that you're like, oh my God, that's me too, I feel that too, so then you're not alone. All right. And he was like, hey, I want you to come speak at the Hispanic Police Officer Association of America, the HPOA.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, cool. So I walked in, HPOA. I got introduced by him. Once again, extremely high-ranking individual that you would think all ears and eyes are on me, because if I'm telling you that this is somebody I want you to listen to, you're going to listen to it. As soon as he said, he didn't even let me introduce myself. He said, I'm going to this individual is a Marine, blah, blah, blah. Everybody was like, oh, wow, been to Iraq multiple times, a combat veteran. He's now 100% disabled for PTSD, blah, blah, blah. There was like 4 or 5 old guys that got up from the back and walked off.
Oh, no.
And I was like, that's the problem.
That's the mentality.
That's the mentality. Don't get me wrong. Some of these hard dogs, these old timers, are awesome. And you want them on the job. But they were trained to never show a soft side. They were trained and told, you never have a soft side. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not telling, this is the problem that I have, because we go to extremes. Now, all of a sudden, we say we want the department to talk about it. Now they're going to turn everybody into a fucking victim.
Right.
And I think there's a big difference where you can understand that something's wrong with you and not be a victim about it.
At all. Absolutely not. And that victim mentality shit is not for me. But with that said, and there are victims out there that are true.
But that's that hardcore machismo.
But I feel like, exactly, the hardcore machista thing for me, it's not so much as, it's still viewed as weakness.
Yeah.
And that in the Hispanic world and community, any mental health issue or any mental health problem that you have, it's weakness. Oh, la pobrecita, she's crazy.
It literally was what I said in my video.
Oh, she's crazy.
No, don't talk, no hables así porque suenas loco. You sound crazy. It's like,
ay, pobrecita, she's crazy or whatever. She had like a mental breakdown. Oh, no, she's never gonna be the same.
And if I did though, I mean,
listen, I will tell you a little bit that you might not know. I was married for a very long time to my high school sweetheart, my childhood sweetheart, and that divorce broke me. And that's where my PTSD came from. But I was the first one in my family to be divorced. And I was the first one in my family to
big stress.
Exactly.
What are you going to do to the family? What are the family members going to say about you?
Well, that's what I feel like that's what made both of us stay longer than we should have.
Well, you should have.
And also, I was the first one in my family to
go. Stop right there. It's what made you listen to what we're saying here. The stigma.
Yeah.
Oh, not even mental health now. The stigma that was pushed on someone from their traditional values.
Yes.
All right. Pushed you to stay in a relationship that made it worse.
Yeah.
Okay, which is the same thing that's happening in mental health. It's people being
in
pushed to stay
everything.
quiet and making it worse to the point where what? You're either going to kill yourself, domestic violence,
Yep.
have a domestic violence
Yep.
issue, or in mental health, you're going to kill yourself,
Yep.
or snap.
Everybody has a breaking point, and if we just listen to everybody and what you should or could or whatever you should be doing, that doesn't apply. And this is why I'm very open about me and what works for me, but I always follow it with, you need to find what works for you, because what works for me might not necessarily work for you. How it looks on me does not necessarily.
And
look
I
on
don't
you.
want to hear. I don't want to hear. Well, bottling it up works for me. Bullshit.
No, it
Bullshit.
never does. It never, ever does. It's like shaking a Coke
No, it
can,
is.
and it's still there. But the minute you open that thing up, poof, it's gonna explode. It's the same exact thing. And I feel like that's what happened to me before. I was bottling so much inside. I never dealt with the issues in my marriage, and then they just came crashing down all at once, and it was very hard to deal with that. And the ending of my marriage, it was like the ending of everything I knew. Now it was going into the unknown. That freaked me the hell out, and I didn't know how to go about doing life without this person that had been a part of my life forever. It's almost like a limb. It's like losing a limb. It's like, how do I live with it without it now, So navigating through all of that and having to really be open about my mental health issues with my family. Till this day, my parents are like, I admire you so much for being outspoken about this, because it was a lot. And not to mention, before all of this, when my brother is a Marine.
Yeah.
My brother was overseas several tours, just like yourself. And when my brother was injured overseas, I was the one who got the call. And guess what? My brother made me promise not to ever tell anybody. So he was overseas injured, and I couldn't tell my parents. I had to swallow that. I had to bottle it in. But every time my phone rang, it was that, oh my God, what happened now? Oh my God, did something else happen? Oh my God, did something else happen? It was that constant anxiety that I had to deal with on a day-to-day. So it was like different aspects of my life that I've had to deal with that. And so I tend to be a very anxious person, very outspoken about it, but I have done everything I can, not just to talk about it, but to seek help. I had to find help. I could not do it. I got to the point where it was controlling me instead of me controlling it.
Well, that's what happens. It ends up
just
controlling.
me.
Yeah.
It was controlling me. It was debilitating. I didn't want to leave my house. All I wanted to do was sleep, because sleeping, I wouldn't have to feel.
Well, I mean, it's the word trigger. When you get triggered with something, half the time is you don't even know you got triggered is the problem. So once you learn that word triggered and what your triggers are, you're like, whoa, that just really changes everything for me.
Absolutely.
Because now for instance, I didn't know, but one of my biggest triggers, especially in the summertime, was walking by a dumpster. People don't realize.
The smell of one.
Yeah. But Iraq is a dumpster. Iraq, it was like semi-trucks or dump trucks would just pull on the side of the road, back up, and dump the trash. And it was like this whole street full of trash on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And this one guy that works there in Iraq or whatever, in Iraq, he covered his face with his shemagh and stuff, burning the trash. So Iraq smells like 130-degree burning dumpster.
Yeah.
So I walked by a dumpster, and it's not like I had flashbacks like on TV, because I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But for like a second, I was there. I smelled the sand. I felt the heat, everything. And I tried to go on before with the rest of my day, snapping at people. This is that. What I'm trying to get at, though, is that I learned what my trigger was.
Right.
That was one of my triggers. Now I'm able to walk by a trash can, knowing it might affect me, but at least I know now it might affect me.
I was
if
just
it
going to
does,
ask you that. What do you do to work through your triggers?
Well,
nothing. How did you work through it?
knowing what a trigger is,
Right.
knowing that this
Just
actually
being aware.
that this triggered me.
Yeah.
But that doesn't come without education, without
Exactly.
saying I might need
Exactly.
help.
Exactly.
Because-
Without actually talking about it, And now let me ask you something, and let me turn the tables on you. How do you escape? How did you escape? And do you talk to someone?
I mean, you're
about
literally
it?
looking at it.
Right,
So-
but at that time.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. People see me now and they're like, damn, Ozzy, at least, especially the ones that know me and had knew me, like, I cannot believe where you're at. Look, it's very plain and simple. I've never lied about it. In order for the VA to make you 100%, permanently and total disabled for one disability, especially PTSD, I had to be severe. I was severe to the point where I just knew that I wasn't going to hurt people.
Right.
And I would verbally express that because my whole fear was taking my rights away. Because if you're deemed incapacitable by the VA,
Right.
you don't even get your own paycheck. It would have gone straight to my wife because I'm deemed where I can't even pay my own expenses.
Right.
So these are important questions that I would get asked all the time. And once it started picking up in the VA that I get asked these questions all the time, has your rent been paid? Has your blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, let me make sure that I got at least this taken care of. And once I started realizing that I was letting some of that slip away is when I said, I really do need help. Right. And I went and got help. I tried all sorts of things. The VA had me on 12 pills a day at my highest point. I was taking, they're like Xanax bars. They're Klonopin or clonazepam, something like that. I was taking 4 of those, 4 to 5 a day. 3 Seroquels a day. Seroquels given to schizophrenic and bipolar people to like kind of bring them down. And then I was taking my pain pills because of my back injuries and stuff. And then my liver enzymes are all messed up. So now I got to take something else for that. Like I said, I was taking 12 pills a day. None of that was helping me because they were trying to fix what the problem had caused, right? They were trying to fix that instead of actually fixing what was causing the problem or what caused the problem. And forget it. I knew what caused the problem, Iraq. I just didn't know the triggers that came afterwards and how to deal with those. So then I went to this thing called the Vet Center. I found out about the Vet Center where it's a department of the VA. The Vet Center was started after Vietnam by Vietnam veterans. So it's started by us, for you. So their whole thing. But they are a department of the VA. I was very hesitant at first. But then when I went my first time here in Doral, I remember them calling, me signing in. And I was like, this is just like the VA. But then they called the therapist and they were like, hey, your client is here. I was like, oh, I just got called a client, not a patient. So I was like, okay. So then when we started talking, she's like, oh, you're a client because whatever. It's all like little mental things. Yes. But still, at the Vet Center, they were able to see me. There's also a family counselor. As long as you've served in a combat zone, I believe, or overseas, they ask for your D214. They don't care if you're 1% or 100% disabled. But it's treatment to what your issue is. And we're going to teach you. It's a lot more education at the Vet Center than there was
and I think
treatment.
It should be.
Which is, I think.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, though. I think everybody should be, at first, given education.
Yes, I agree
with
you.
If at a psychological or a doctor level, you realize that this individual is not in a place, and not that they're dumb, it's just that sometimes you get so blinded by your trauma or whatever, your defense mechanisms, that doesn't matter what you're telling me.
Yeah.
I'm never going to see it, So I might have to then be more aggressive in my treatment with this person. But the education for me at the beginning was never there. I started going to the VA in 2008, and my PTSD got worse.
Wow.
While I was getting help, while I was highly medicated. It just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. Until the point where then my wife kicked me out of my house. When she kicked me out of my house, that's where then I really then closed the doors, because then I was like, well, now she shut me down. Where it wasn't till thickness, all that, whatever your vows, I'm like, she shut me down. My friends shut me down, all that stuff. So it's like, that's when I was at the point where now I'm going to end it all because nobody understands. But then I went to the Vet Center. That's where I went to the Vet Center in, I think, 2013. And I started learning about triggers and this and that. Then I went to a reunion in September of 2014 to mark the 10-year anniversary of when we lost our guys. 4 of our guys. We lost one April 13th. The other one was September 12th. And then 3 of them September 13th. In that reunion then, me so educated about what I have, I started asking then, bringing in conversation, but being very direct. Like, hey, does anybody here ever want to kill themselves? And like, it got quiet. I'm like, I just want to know. I like it that you're gonna do it, but like, do you get the urge of like, I'm done with this. I don't have a way to fix it. And my friend PJ O'Malley was like, hey, Martinez, I know intimately what my barrel tastes like. Then at that point, I knew that I was no longer alone. Okay. So now with my education, now knowing that, okay, fine, this is what I got, but everybody else kind of really is experiencing the same thing, different ways they show it or whatnot. That not making me feel alone is what really shifted me. Told my wife to go to therapy with me. She went to the vet center with me and stuff, and we got back together. I think after like 2.5 years of being separated, we got back together. But what keeps me going now is my organization and my podcast. What I'm doing, though, is what keeps me going is that I'm surrounding myself with people that make me feel normal. Right. Is what people don't understand.
Absolutely.
I'm doing this in a very selfish way. Like, I posted something.
Should be. Your mental health should be.
In a way, right. Which I posted something the other day where that guy that he's famous now, just became famous, that he sings that song, Richmond, from Richmond, north of Richmond or whatever. He posted like, oh, I've already been offered $8 million and tour buses and blah, blah, blah. He's like, I didn't do this because I want money. I did this because I'm tired of my life the way it is right now, the way we're doing this and that. And I loved it. I shared it. And I was like, sometimes we don't do things for money. People have always asked me, like, how come you don't pay yourself through your organization or the podcast? Like, for instance, the podcast, as you can tell, I'm spending money on it.
Right.
But I don't monetize it. I've never monetized my podcast, and it's just because it's my form of therapy.
Right.
I like the fact that I could talk to someone that never went to Iraq, but has same feelings or processing of things in life that I went through. And then that goes to then makes me realize that although we're all individual and we're all little tiny specks of people, we all deal with mental health somewhat the same way.
Yes, absolutely. And I think like it's one of those things where a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard the saying, misery loves company, right? And people like to throw that around in a negative way. Like, oh, that person's unhappy. They want misery around them. No. Misery loves company is when you're down in the dumps and you surround yourself with people that can relate to you, it makes you not feel alone. It makes you realize that this is a bigger issue. It's not just you against that. It's all of you facing that same issue. And sometimes I do like to look around and say, oh my God, you understand me. Finally, I can talk to you about this without being judged, because I feel like if I talk to someone that's never been through that, which is what happened to me when I was going through my really dark moments, I isolated myself because I was kind of like the first one of my group to kind of be going through that. And I just felt very judged. And people were kind of like bashing my ex, and that's not what was making me feel good.
And maybe maybe you didn't feel judged. You felt you were going to be judged, like how we talked about our whole family thing when being separated and stuff, that you're like, the whole world's going to judge me.
Yeah, and it's not even that. Like I did feel judged because a few times that I did speak out, I got comments that I don't necessarily agree with. But again, it was coming from someone that didn't experience that. They didn't have the knowledge of it. And so I kind of just shut down. And I went into my own little world. And I'm talking about like my physical health took a toll. Like I ended up in the hospital, like the whole thing.
No, that's how it was. When me and my wife were separated, I gained, I think it was 50 something pounds. I was 260 is what was my weight.
Well, I ended up losing. So I went down to 92 pounds, but to the point where my kidneys were starting to, not
function correctly.
Exactly. And so I wasn't hungry. I could not eat. My anxiety was so bad that I could not physically eat. And I was just like, it would hurt to lay down in bed. My bones hurt. Everything hurt. And I don't think people are like, oh my God, you shouldn't be complaining about losing weight. Not that way. That's not healthy. I'm 5'4". I'm not a short person. So it was a lot. And I just felt so alone. I would cry in my room saying, I don't have anybody to talk to because nobody gets it. And so people were like saying things, example, why are you sleeping so much? Just get out of bed and do something. Go out there. You're single now. The last thing I wanted to do was go out into the world and be overwhelmed with people, and crowds were like scary to me and overwhelming, and
nothing. And you already knew you would hear, hey, we're so and so, or what happened? What happened? Like,
yeah. And I just didn't want to, I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't mentally prepared for any of that or emotionally prepared for that. So I isolated myself. And now when I see my friends kind of going through similar situations or whatever, I'm like, I got you. If you need space, I understand it. Just know that I'm just a phone call away. Every now and then I'll shoot them a text message saying, I'm thinking about you. Hope all is well. Never ask any questions about the problem. Never ask questions about the issue.
Yeah, don't be judgmental.
And listen, anybody that knows me will tell you this much about me. I never ask questions about personal life or your relationship. I never get involved, but I'm always here to listen if you guys want to talk about it. All my friends can tell you that. I never wanted to feel judged, and that really made me shut down. And when I started going to my therapist, this is one of the first things that I talked to her about, and she was the one who told me, well, they're not equipped with the tools to talk to you about this and guide you through.
They're not equipped to understand what you're going through. Yeah.
And at the same time, they might be going through something and they're not even aware of it. And so now it's like, well, I don't have to focus on my shit. Let me focus on yours because it's easier. I'm disconnected emotionally from this situation. So let me go on. And there's also been times where my friends have come to me and I'm at that moment not the right person to help them through that because it might be overwhelming or triggering for me. So I have to bow out and say, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. I wish you the best of luck, but I have to remove myself from certain situations. I feel those conversations. And when you try to give someone, advice and they're just not taking it, I have to bow out and say, I love you with all my heart, but I can love you from here.
Yeah, you can't sync with that person on their shit, which it's happened.
Because it's going to drag you down mentally and emotionally. I am still very fragile when it
We're
comes
still
to certain
human.
things.
We're still human.
And so I have to recognize where that's kind of taking place. And I say, this is not for me. I love you, but I can't do it.
Yeah, no, I've had the same thing. I've had guys that'll call me or text me, and then I'll snap at them or say something, and they're like, "Bro, you out of all people, me out of all people, what? I'm just like you, first of all, just because I kind of figured out what was wrong with me in life and figured that aspect out, and I'm living a little bit better life right now. Doesn't mean that I still don't have that piece of person in me.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
And this is like an ongoing thing, right? Like it's an ongoing thing where we're just gotten better at dealing with it.
Well, once you realize and you're educated on yourself on what are the proper steps to deal with your mental health, that's why now you can be that person and be like, nope, I don't need this right now, or right now at this point in time, let me step away from this, because you're in tune with your mental health.
Absolutely, 1,000%. And I will tell you, going back to the whole Surfside thing, there was one particular supervisor that triggered me big time. And I just could not do it anymore. And then, so how do you deal with a higher up that's triggering you, but that's still your boss, and you have to face this person every day, and you can't escape it. It's not like I can say it's like a friend where I'm like, okay, well, I can't talk to you right now.
Silence the notifications.
Exactly. I still have to answer this person's calls and text messages, and it was becoming so hard. I was so angry all the time, and that's when I had to go and get help. I did go to our psychological services. I did talk to them. I expressed my feelings about it. And they offered some great, advice. And they were like, you can always, they give us the option of filing for like a hardship. So if I have to change shifts or change, whatever to avoid certain individuals so that it can help me in that way, that you can do that. You have the ability to do that. And so I feel like another thing that we should talk about or address is there is help out there. You're just not even aware of it. There are options out there. You're just not aware of it because you're not talking about it. You're not asking about it. And you're not talking to your neighbor or your friend or your coworker about it. You're just staying silent. If you did talk about it, you would be aware that there's so much more help that's not going to affect your job. You don't even have to do it through work. You can do it outside of work.
That's the thing. That's what I've told a lot of my friends. I'm like, dude, you don't have to go to psych services at your
you
department.
You can go outside of it, and nothing's going to be disclosed. Everything's going to be private. Nobody's going to find out about it unless you really are a danger to others or yourself.
Then they're going to let them know, yeah.
Exactly. And then at that point, it's a different situation. But at that point, at the very least, you're getting the help that you need before something happens. And these are available to you to change your shifts, to change work, to change units, move around, especially cops. They have the ability to do that within the department. Do so. Your mental health is a lot more important than your current position.
Yep.
You're just a number there. But to your family and everybody else, you're their
You might be number
everything.
one. No, that's what I'm
Exactly.
saying. And I've said
You're
that
their
before.
everything,
You're a
yeah.
number to certain people, and that number might be 100. But to other people,
you're number one.
you're the only number.
Yeah,
Number one, the only
exactly,
number. That's
exactly.
it. I got no other numbers.
Exactly. And so, listen, at the end of the day, work is work. But find that disconnect. Find that disconnect, whatever it is, whatever works for you. For some people, it's, hey, going to shoot at the range, or going jogging, going fishing, whatever it is.
Find your exhaust.
Find that for you.
On that note, let's disconnect a little bit. I'm going to have these questions here, these little cards. They're fun cards. I'm going to have you pick 2 or 3 of them, and then we're going to ask that random stuff there. So we have an interview card here. We have a what the heck? No. Oh. What the heck? And then what else? What do we have there? This is would you rather. Okay, that's perfect right there.
Okay.
All right, so let's go with this question right here. Oh, this is a good one. All right. Who'd play you in a movie?
Oh, man. I hope it's Sofia Vergara. She's Colombian.
So we want Sofia Vergara is who'd you play you in the movie? All right. I mean, that was a silly question, but yeah, obviously there. All right. This one I find interesting, and I picked it specifically because of your job. But what is the strangest skeleton you ever discovered in someone else's closet? And I don't literally mean a skeleton, but that's why I picked that, because I was like, literally, you could have probably your job. You could have literally found a skeleton or 2 in someone's closet. But
that's a good question. What
is the strangest skeleton you ever discovered in someone else's closet? It doesn't have to be on the job, but still, I thought that would be funny.
It's probably going to be on the job, because that's where I'm faced the strangest things. I did have a scene where the person actually had he was a male, and he committed suicide, but he had a room full of dolls, like creepy ass dolls, like all kinds of dolls.
It's creepy though, like not even Barbies or something like G.I. Joe dolls.
Like those ceramic creepy ass dolls
with the real eyeballs. I hate those.
Dressed in like those vintage dresses or whatever. It was a room full of that, like a room full just for the dolls. So that was creepy. Yeah,
I would say. All right, this one's a fun one, and we'll end it with this one. Would you rather your voice sound like Elmo or Kermit the Frog?
I think Elmo.
Elmo? I don't know. I literally heard this before you got here. I was looking through every single one of them and all these decks. I looked through all the questions, because there were some that were like in the deck back there. There's some that are like X-rated. I was like, I'm not going to ask these questions to somebody I just met. Maybe like third interview we'll joke around. But I was like, and I'm literally reading it, and I'm like, hello, like trying to do the Kermit voice. I was like, how would my podcast be so different? I was like, hello,
you should find
welcome
that voice
to
somewhere.
us. Like,
here and add it.
So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you once again, Monica, for coming on, speaking candidly and honestly about mental health in your career and in the surrounding careers that work with you, and how important that we both honestly think it is. So no, you're welcome. On that note, what piece of advice would you give anybody within the last 30 seconds that, guided towards their mental health that you would give?
I would say, don't be scared to face the hard questions that you're asking yourself and you're doubting yourself about. Ask yourself those questions, and also seek help. Seek help wherever it is. It doesn't have to be on the job. It could be outside of work. But even if you need help recognizing what some of your odd behaviors are that are not normal to you, you're going to be able to see that. You're going to be doing things outside of the norm for yourself that you're starting to question. When those questions start arising, go and get help. Talk to somebody about it before it's too late. And you can avoid the hard things at work, at home, the family, the friends, maybe drug addiction, alcoholism, any of these things, because it can lead to that. And we just want to avoid that. I wish I would have spoken to somebody sooner. I wish I would have recognized the signs. I wish I would have been educated to avoid being in a situation that wasn't healthy for me anymore. And I would have gotten out sooner. And even for him too. And just avoided a lot of heartache and a lot of stress and damage, because there was a lot of damage.
So definitely don't be silent. Speak out.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I want to break the stigma that, if you're suffering, that you should stay quiet because that's what makes you stronger and cooler or whatever. It's not. It really is not. Not anymore. Not in 2023.
Nope. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about the podcast, because my intentions behind this is just to help people. So get the word out there. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.